Here's what's in the news now. A family torn apart. A 2-month-old girl killed. Her dad and 3-year-old brother seriously injured. All of that, police say, happening after a suspect trying to evade officers crashed into another car in Plainfield. Our Logan Gay just talked with the kid's mom and joins us live in the studio tonight. So Logan, this is just hard to imagine, that kind of loss.
Yes, Scott, she's heartbroken. She spoke with me over Zoom while she was in the hospital with her son. She told me she's still trying to process how this happened.
This could happen to anyone, and today it happened to me.
Jack Botter is still trying to comprehend how her life changed forever within minutes at this intersection. She says her fiance Shadow was taking their 2 kids to their grandparents' house when tragedy struck.
It's going to be 2 vehicles involved, a black Buick versus a gray Kia.
It's really difficult to go through this and know that we didn't do anything wrong.
According to Plainfield Police, an Avon officer tried to stop a car near US 40 and Ronald Reagan Parkway. However, police say the driver did not stop and crashed into Botter's fiance's car, carrying her daughter Iris and son Aries.
The car instantly caught on fire.
Police officers and Good Samaritans jumped in to help get her family out of the car as it was engulfed in flames. Some of the officers even injuring themselves in the process.
How many burnt patients?
1 that I'm aware of.
That turned out to be Aries. He was pulled out the car and rushed to the hospital with burns on 60% of his body.
Control repeat. We got a father with major third-degree facial burns here.
Something like this happening just isn't right.
While Aries and his dad didn't make it out of the car, Botter says her daughter Iris did not.
We have confirmed that there was no child in the other vehicle.
Botter says Iris was only 2 months old and had just left her 2-month doctor checkup 30 minutes before the crash.
She was honestly everything to me. Me and my fiance were doing everything we could for those babies.
Her fiance Shadow is also in the hospital with broken ribs and a laceration on his spleen. Even though Botter is overwhelmed with sadness about what they lost, she says she's grateful for what was saved.
I know I lost my baby girl, but I still have family left. It means everything to me.
Police say the suspect is in custody, as Botter hopes no one else will have to go through this pain.
Everyone needs to drive safe right now because you really never know. I was in the happiest times of my life and suddenly I'm in the worst.
Botter says her son has a long road to recovery and she's going to be there every step of the way.
So heartbreaking for that family. Logan, thank you. Well, tonight we're seeing an increase in children coming down with a variety of illnesses, including the common cold, the flu, even whooping cough.
Yes, according to some doctors here in central Indiana. Karen Campbell shares advice for keeping your family healthy.
'Tis the season for cold and flu. Marion County health officials say last week there was nearly a 32% increase of children ages 5 to 17 being treated in emergency departments for influenza-like symptoms. Doctors are saying flu, COVID, and whooping cough that's impacting some schools. Beech Grove and Anderson schools had an uptick in absences due to illnesses. Dr. Trenton Schmalley with Riverview Health says good hygiene is key to stay safe.
Washing hands with soap and water frequently. If you're going to be out in public, try not to touch your face. I have young kids myself, and when we see them like hold on to all the railings and just rub everything and rub their face and body, my wife and I just kind of cringe. If people are sick and they're touching those things as well, there's a good chance that you could also get sick.
Dr. Schmalley says if you're feeling sick, stay home. In Indianapolis, Karen Campbell, 13 News.
2024 was a year tailor-made for Indianapolis. After all, we do all-star events better than anyone. And over the last 12 months, we were swimming in them. All that action eclipsing previous records. Tonight, our Alex Almanza shares the state of tourism in our city and the race to build on all that success.
Indianapolis has had a slam dunk of a year in 2024, hosting a jam-packed calendar full of events. But as the celebrations fade, an even bigger challenge emerges. How do you turn all that momentum into long-term success?
Records are made to be broken. So let's break another one.
Thousands of community leaders packed the Indiana Convention Center Wednesday to learn how to top such a legendary year.
Today's a celebration. We are announcing records that we broke in the year 2024. It was an anomaly year. We had all these amazing citywide events.
Visit Indy's State of Tourism event brought a sold-out crowd. Many have helped make Indy an internationally known city. But one of the biggest catalysts of Indy's success, the Indiana Fever, with players like Rookie of the Year Caitlin Clark making ripples around the world. But for those who know Indy basketball best, this moment has been years in the making.
Our city is booming. There's so many great things, and I think when you look at a room like this, record-selling crowd, every year I feel like they're saying, man, this is the biggest crowd. Every year it grows. The rise of sports is just one piece of a much bigger story.
Our momentum as we step into 2025 is undeniable, with more than $2.5 billion invested in tourism infrastructure enhancements downtown.
New projects continue to add to the downtown experience, from reimagining Georgia Street to revitalizing Circle Center Mall. It's all part of an effort to make Indianapolis a home for all. In Indianapolis, Alex Almanza, 13 News.
At the State House, Indiana has some of the lowest voter turnout numbers in the nation when it comes to voting in presidential and midterm elections. This is data that comes from a 2023 report that measures civic engagement all across the states.
And now some say that a bill being considered in the Senate will just make those voter turnout numbers even worse. 13 News State House reporter Emily Longnecker is here to explain.
Right now, Hoosiers have 28 days of early voting where they can cast their ballot before Election Day. Senate Bill 284 would cut that number of days in half. The bill's author, Republican Senator Gary Byrne, calls it common sense. Those against this bill call it voter suppression. Senator Byrne testified before the Senate's Election Committee today, saying Indiana has more early voting days than any of its neighbors. Byrne cited Kentucky, which he said only gives its residents 3 days to cast their ballots early. Byrne says he's talked to county clerks throughout the state who told him fewer voters show up in those first 14 days than in the last half of early voting in Indiana. A representative from the Indiana Secretary of State's office testified in support of the bill. He cited statistics from 2014 to 2022, showing only about 24% of registered voters cast ballots early in those first 14 days.
I've never once had somebody say, I wish we had more days to vote.
Last year, Republican Jay Hart challenged Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray for his seat, but lost. Hart says he supports only 1 day of voting on Election Day, except for those who can't get to the polls because of physical disabilities.
The idea is that we're giving them more opportunity to vote with more days. As we've given more days over time, we're seeing the decline of participation in our elections.
Senate Bill 284 had several people testify against it.
We don't need less early voting in Indiana. We need more of it. And this bill significantly reduces the options. It will be particularly harmful to elderly and disabled voters.
We want people to vote, so we don't appreciate making it harder to vote. If you listen to Hoosiers, then they will, what they tell you will tell you that we need more accessible voting, easier voting.
Cecilia Pointer, who helps register voters, said just because some counties see fewer voters in the first 14 days of early voting doesn't mean that's the case for all counties, especially ones with larger populations like Marion County.
I disagree with grouping a small populous area with the populous area and expecting us to be able to work out what might work for them.
Even in my counties, this past election cycle, we saw long lines, even with the 28 days. So I know that if we reduce that number, we're going to see longer lines in that 14-day window, even longer lines on Election Day. We should be making it easier for people to vote, not more difficult.
Democratic State Senator J.D. Ford, whose district encompasses parts of Marion, Hamilton, and Boone counties, said he'll be offering an amendment later that calls for more early voting locations, with the number of early voting days in this bill now cut in half. Senate Bill 284 passed out of committee today by a vote of 6-3. Those who support it say the changes to the number of days just make sense. Those against this bill say if it's not broke, don't fix it. We'll see what the full Senate has to say if this bill gets called for a second reading. At the Indiana State House, Emily Longnecker, 13 News.
Politics is, of course, a hot topic, and even though, as the saying goes, we should never discuss politics or religion at the dinner table, we still do at the table, online, and at work. So how do we skillfully manage these touchy conversations without losing our minds? Richard Burke is a conflict resolution expert with JAMS Pathways. He's here to help us out. Thank you so much for being here. So can't we just avoid it at all?
Well, you can say that, but we watch news stories and people want to report about things. And, there's a big difference between just talking about a fact and having it turn into political speech. So I think that you have to establish clear boundaries. We know that free speech is an important right, but we don't get to shout fire in a crowded theater. And unless you work in a think tank or for a political campaign, probably the mission of your organization has very little to do with politics. And so an organization can create clear boundaries and rules around what is permitted and not permitted to be talking about at work.
And not just what we say, but also what we're wearing. It's not just verbal, right?
Absolutely. Speech can be verbal, but can also be a T-shirt or a mug or a hat or a pin. And so, I think, again, establishing really clear boundaries at work and making sure that you walk your talk. If you are a supervisor, you need to model the behavior you want your colleagues and supervisees to emulate. So it's going to be an important thing to recognize that speech takes many forms.
What if you've gotten into a situation at work where it's downright uncomfortable or ugly and the manager's involved, but nothing seems to be resolved?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed over the course of my many decades in conflict resolution is that when people are promoted from off the line to becoming a manager, they really need to stop and learn a little bit more about conflict resolution. So, borrowing the skills of a mediator, learning to navigate difficult conversations. There's a wealth of information and education out there available for new managers, and I think that they would be well served to get that education themselves and to make sure as many people around them are conflict resolvers. And that said, when things get particularly thorny, you can always call in a conflict resolution professional. The organization that I work for intervenes in a lot of organizations where things have gotten a little bit out of hand. Some people say, it's a sign of weakness to have to call in somebody who's a professional, but in fact, you call in a CPA to do your taxes. You go to a medical professional or a surgeon when things get rough medically. So it's really a sign of wisdom and intelligence and bravery to call in a conflict resolution professional when things get a little bit over your head.
All right, Richard Burke, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dustin. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thank you.
Many Hispanic and Latino businesses are closed all across the country today for what's being called a day without immigrants.
And that includes dozens of stores right here in central Indiana. Our Jenny Runovich shows us tonight the mission behind this movement.
In Fountain Square, a rare lights off for the lunch rush at this Mexican-style sandwich shop.
1:20, still lunch hour. We'd be somewhat busy, yeah.
But on Monday,
Quite different today. Very different setting.
they closed for a cause.
We are joining in solidarity with our friends and family for the Un Día Sin Inmigrantes movement.
No customers, no cooking, no employees. A day without immigrants is meant to show what life would be like without immigrants, the key role they play in our economy.
It's a lot more about legacy.
Alex Zarco is the son of Mexican immigrants. His dad started the restaurant he now owns while on a work permit.
People come in here with no money, nowhere to stay, and somehow they make it. And that to me is amazing.
Dozens of Indiana businesses closed in support of Monday's movement. Signs on doors, posts on social media explaining the cause, even more taking part across the country.
We want to make a statement that not only are we really important to the economy of this country, but that we have a right to be here, to live here.
We are hard workers. We have a support in this community.
The one-day event is partially a protest of President Trump's policies, but also to remind Americans of the contributions immigrants make to our communities.
When you take a stand, when you voice your opinion, when everyone voices their opinion, that's when things start moving.
And when Zarco's shop reopens Tuesday, he hopes customers are more aware. In Indianapolis, Jenny Runovich, 13 News.
Today's movement didn't come without pushback. Another local restaurant told us they got threats of violence after posting on social media that they were participating. We're seeing photos from the Delphi murders crime scene. These pictures shared publicly by the state of Indiana just this week.
Here's a close-up of Libby German's cell phone under the leaves there. And on that phone, the video of, quote, Bridge Guy from February 13th of 2017.
We want to bring in Samantha Johnson, who's been covering this case. Why are we seeing these pictures today?
Yeah, so you'll remember last month, the defense team filed what they called a motion to correct errors. They gave us several examples and reasons why they felt like Richard Allen's conviction should have been overturned, and that included some conflicting arguments about the cell phone that you saw in those photos. We can tell you now the Carroll County prosecutor has filed his response.
Richard Allen is serving 130 years in prison for the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German. In January, Allen's attorney said it was a mistake. The trial excluded an alleged confession by a man named Ron Logan, who detailed how he killed the two girls. But Carroll County prosecutor Nick McLeland says the man who allegedly heard that confession and told police failed a polygraph miserably, and many of the details are directly contradicted by the evidence. Former prosecutor and defense attorney Brad Banks.
And they're saying the confession was made to another person who panned out to be completely unreliable.
Allen spent most of his time before trial at the Westville Correctional Facility, a placement his attorneys say was, quote, plainly illegal from start to finish. They say it impacted Allen's mental health and the outcome of the trial. The state now responding, saying, quote, the motion for safekeeping does not impact the ability to have a fair trial and is not a reason to overturn the verdict.
Look, this guy's in custody. He's not being given a bond. We're just talking about where can we keep him safely. And so that doesn't trigger your right to counsel.
The state also shared these evidence photos of Libby's cell phone found at the crime scene. They say the pictures support their theory that water or dirt could have impacted the phone. But the defense claims that's not the case. They say someone activated it after Libby's phone reportedly stopped moving. So now the state urging the judge to reject Allen's request for a hearing or to overturn the verdict, writing, quote, the defense is not permitted to request a new trial to change strategy when their chosen path fails.
So many details there. So glad that you're familiar with this case and can sort it out for us. So great job with that. I guess the big question is now, what happens next?
Yeah, so you heard from Brad Banks in that story there. He expects the judge to deny that motion, and he also expects that to happen pretty quickly. We're talking about days, if even that long. And he says when that does happen, it'll essentially restart the appeal process for Richard Allen's attorneys, which we do expect will happen at some point. They would have 30 days at that point to file a notice of appeal. So a lot to keep track of, a lot of deadlines, but of course we'll keep you updated.
All right, thank you so much, Sam.
Fallout from turmoil within city government. Democrat Jesse Brown ousted from the Democratic caucus, and now some community members are pushing back, voicing concerns and demanding answers. Our Logan Gay went to get them tonight, and she joins us in the newsroom after talking with counselors and constituents. Logan?
Hey, Scott, constituents did not hesitate to mobilize after Jesse Brown's expulsion from the council's Democratic caucus, but many of them left the city-county building today disappointed.
The people in this room say they're fed up.
We need to step up as citizens. And that's what we're here to do, is to step up and say no more, we're done.
What was supposed to be a standard council committee meeting ended up being flooded with Jesse Brown supporters, eager to make their voices heard about his expulsion from the council's Democratic caucus.
Constituents are concerned and they want to know, why are we treated in this manner?
As many people as possible squeezed themselves into the meeting, which was held in a small conference room. It lasted only minutes and ended with them making standard changes to some committee assignments and no mention of Brown or the large group of people who came out. Some say it was a waste of time.
They knew what people were here to hear and they denied it. They denied any discussion about it.
According to Brown, the caucus did not give him a reason for its expulsion, but he believes his push for transparency and his call for fully funded public education put him at odds with some counselors who he says may not hold the same belief.
Christina Smith's kids go to an IPS innovation school. She says this roller coaster has been rough on students and parents.
What I'm hearing from parents right now is that they don't want to pick a school in IPS because they don't know if it's going to exist.
Smith says regardless of Brown's expulsion from the Democratic caucus, constituents in his district are going to do whatever they can to save IPS.
We're not trusting anybody anymore. If you're not voting how the people need you to vote to save us from big businesses, from people looking to make $1 off our kids' backs, you're going down too.
Some members of the group said they are going to continue to go to the Education Committee meetings to use their voice and plan to go through each city county councilor's finance reports. I did reach out to Jesse Brown and the leader of the Democratic caucus for a comment, but have not heard back yet.
All right, Logan, thanks so much.
And it's not just manufacturing and trade deficits. Supporters of these tariffs say this isn't a trade war, it's a drug war.
Allison Gormley tells us what's the deal with other reasons President Trump is looking to tariffs. And Allison, this is just something that is wide-reaching and impacting a lot of folks.
Yeah, typically it may be one or two things, but this has it's multi-pronged, you could say. But he's using the tariffs to try and fight the flow of fentanyl into the country as well as undocumented immigrants. Now, tariffs are a tool in the government's toolbox to force other countries to make changes. The idea? Money talks. Tariffs are a tax placed on imports coming into the U.S. from other countries. The tax is paid by American businesses buying the goods. Experts say President Trump is likely doing this for two purposes, economic and political.
So he's trying to address some of these economic imbalances, and at the same time, he's trying to exert some political negotiating leverage against these countries for other reasons.
Now, will this work? Time will tell. Right. Other countries have said that they'll retaliate and do their own tariffs, so we will see if that starts a trade war.
In this edition of Real Men Wear Gowns, we are focusing on heart health. February is American Heart Month to highlight how important this is and to encourage everybody to take it seriously. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in this country. And joining me now to talk more about it is Dr. Anthony Bashel, a cardiologist with Franciscan Health. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thank you for having me.
So first of all, if I'm a guy who's never paid attention to my heart, to my health, where do you suggest I start?
I would start with your primary care provider. Okay. And there's some very simple things you can do because people forget early stages of heart disease don't have symptoms. So if you're waiting for the symptoms, you're already kind of behind the 8 ball and it's already too late. But there's some simple scans you can get. You can get a heart scan, which looks for a buildup of calcification in the blood supply to the heart. And it tends to catch heart disease really quite early. You can get basic blood pressure checks, cholesterol level checks, and screens for markers of inflammation. One of the more exciting things we're finding now with cardiometabolic care, as the heart and the kidney and the liver are also closely interacted, you can do some very simple tests. Believe it or not, getting something as simple as a urine protein can indicate future increased risk for kidney, but also more importantly, heart disease. And nothing that I've just talked about will necessarily have any symptoms. And it can slowly build over time. So you need to go looking for it. And you can look for it, as I say, with a simple heart scan, some blood work, some urine checks, and an ultrasound of the liver.
I want to get to something that's getting a lot of attention lately, and that is these GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic or Mounjaro. You've heard of them to help people with their weight. Well, apparently they also have been linked to health benefits in other ways, including helping our heart health. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's been shown in numerous studies to reduce the risk of recurrent heart attack, in other studies to prevent admission to the hospital. And people often say, well, it's about the weight loss, and that's surely an important component. But there are other components. It helps reduce inflammation in the body, which is a real enemy to the heart and the kidney and the liver. It's been shown to improve kidney function. It's been shown to help reverse fatty liver disease. It helps bring diabetes under control. And we're talking 1 shot a week. We're not talking shots of insulin every day or multiple pills. We're just talking 1 shot a week. It's been also shown to help what is a person's cardiometabolic profile. That's how the heart, kidney, and liver interact, and it improves it across the board, whilst at the same time, as we say in my clinic, having this amazing secondary effect of helping people lose weight, feel better.
All right, so we will have much more of this in our extended conversation online. You can check it out at WTHR.com/realmenweargowns. Dr. Paschal, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
The 500 Festival just announced the theme for this year's AES 500 Festival Parade. And can you guess what it is? Well, Connected Through May. You'll see the theme in everything surrounding 500 Festival up and through May. The theme represents a strong sense of community as the festival unites with local organizations and community members through several different events and programs.
In this Black History Month, we are taking a step back in time in Indiana's history. A new traveling exhibit is on display at the Indy Public Library, and it is called Resist. It chronicles the Ku Klux Klan's rise to power, and it also features how people resisted and raised questions about how to combat hate. So it recounts the events at the University of Notre Dame in 1924. The KKK wanted to bring a picnic and parade to their town. Students and community members fought back.
The idea of resisting, letting things happen that you don't think should be happening. Of course, there was some violence involved and other things, and you'll learn a lot about that in the exhibit. But that idea of you have the ability to resist hate, and how have people in the past gone about doing that, and how could you do it in the future?
So this exhibit is on display until March 25th, and there will be a host of presentations, discussions, and exhibits exploring the lives, legacies, and impact of those involved in this historic event. We are going to place some of that for you on our website at WTHR.com.
It was a large resistance movement in South Bend in that particular event in 1924. It wasn't just community members and students, but it was the Notre Dame football team. And legend has it that that's actually how they got their name, the Fighting Irish, by fighting back and kicking out the Klan.
That is news to me.
Yeah, really interesting story. Look
Very
forward to that
interesting.
exhibit too.
Well, you know, and sometimes history can be uncomfortable. It's not one that a story that you necessarily want to highlight when we talk about celebrating history. But it's not just Black history; it's American history. It's part of Indiana's history and story. And they always say it's cliche, but you have to know where you've been to know where you're going.
It's a dark chapter, but one that we have to read.
Yeah.
All right.